For those of you who don't know who I am, my name is Hunter Fikes, and I stand before you today not as an individual, but as a spokesperson for a lot of people. The consensus was I was the least likely to break down up here, and we'll see how that goes, so bear with me. I had the privilege to not only work with John at Central, but also had the privilege to know him outside of work and to see the type of person he was firsthand. He was the big brother I never had. And over the next couple of minutes, I want to share with you the person I knew John to be and what a great person he was. I first met John when I started on my own as a rookie at Central C Detail almost 3 years ago. John proudly served his entire career at Central C Shift, as many of you know. And I'm sure most would agree, John was the guy that went to every call and handled business when it needed to be handled. It did not matter what the call was, if it was in his zone or not, or another officer was calling for backup, you can bet John would be there for you. He was the guy you could always count on. I started to figure that out early on in my career, and I felt myself gravitating towards his positive energy at work. As many of you know, when you finish your probationary period and you are on your own, you pay close attention to those guys that are eager to work and want to help out. I knew early on, along with the rest of the Central crew, you could always count on John to be there for you and to back you up. In fact, he was backing us up all the way to the very end. Over the past couple of days, I've spoken with multiple people that have similar stories as the one I'm about to tell you regarding the type of officer John Anderson was. As many of you know, John was always eager to work DUIs and even encouraged me to get more proficient with DUIs if I was going to stay in Central. John even encouraged me to sign up for a DUI refresher course in the spring of this year, not only to get more proficient with the DUIs, but so we could both sign up to work some of the grants this summer. The shift after the refresher course, I made a DUI stop. And as I was sitting waiting for the breath test, the machine malfunctioned. Who did I call when this happened? In a state of panic. You guessed it. I called John. And true to form, John responded and guided me through the process to successfully complete the test. This is just one example of his selflessness and eagerness to drop everything to help you in a time of need. That was just the type of person he was. He would drop everything in a second to help you out any way he could. In the spring of 2017, we both got hired on to work at Bridgestone Arena, and I got to know John better from a personal perspective. Being the hockey fan John was, you can imagine his face and his attitude when the Preds had the season of a lifetime in the early summer months of 2017. From concerts to hockey games to the SEC championships to the CMAs, we were there together to witness it all. We would sometimes joke about how surreal our life was, watching some of these events and getting to see different players and celebrities close up. I can look back at my phone right now and see the multiple pictures and videos I have of us watching games or concerts. He would always remind me how lucky we were to have the job we had. You could tell every second you spent with him, he loved what he did. I can distinctly remember one of my first hockey games to work at Bridgestone. Mind you, I'm from Alabama, very small town in Alabama, so I was not a hockey fan, nor did I know who any of the Preds players were. We were in the Lexus Lounge of the Bridgestone Arena when I saw a group of 6 to 8 guys hitting a soccer ball around in the back corner. I looked at John and I asked him, "Can they do that down here?" So we might need to go tell them to stop or something. John looked up at me and started to laugh. He said, "I dare you to go tell them to stop. That's 6 or 8 of the Preds players over there." Needless to say, I didn't say anything. From then on out, John would love to remind me that I was absolutely clueless when it came to hockey. But with his insight and guidance, by the time the playoffs were over, I knew enough to at least make people think I knew what was going on. Over the past couple days, I've received many stories, and one that regards Bridgestone that I would like to tell today is from Sergeant Hyder. He told me a story about John and a game that he worked. After certain hockey games, it's normal for those of us that work to run into or see different hockey players leaving the arena. This particular evening, as John was leaving, he crossed paths with Pekka and Saros, who are the two main goalies for the Predators. John, being a hockey lover and a goalie himself, he was starstruck. He told Sarge that he wanted to say something, but just didn't know what to say. John said he finally mustered the courage to say something. John said he looked at Pekka and said, "How do you like your skates?" Sergeant Hyder laughed and said, "You just ask a grown man how he likes his skates? Is that the best you can do?" And John said, "Well, I had to say something." John would often visit with my wife and I at our apartment that we had at the time, mostly to fall asleep in the chair that I had. He would always tell me it was the most comfortable chair he'd ever sat in, even more so than his own bed. Every time he came over, he fell asleep in that chair. That's why when I moved out of the apartment, I gifted that chair to him. I would see pictures of him and Gavin in that chair, so I know it was put to good use. By the end of 2017, I had talked him into joining a local sportplex with me, and we were working out every day after work. I never met his dad until today, but I can tell you he can put together a mean workout. John would bring a spreadsheet of the workouts that he would get from his dad, and we would bust them out every morning. Even after moving the B-detail shift at East Precinct in early 2018, I would make a point to wake up early to drive out to the gym to meet him to work out after he got off, or you best believe I would hear about it. He kept me motivated when I needed it most. On July 3rd, I had the privilege of working with John at Bridgestone hours before the start of his last shift. I was walking down the tunnel to work a concert at Bridgestone when my phone rang. It was John. I answered and I said, "Hey man." He said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm walking down the tunnel." He said, "Hurry up, we're waiting on you." I said, "You're working tonight?" He said, "Yes." I was like, "Sweet, we're hanging out all night." He laughed and agreed. It was the first event we had worked together in months, and I was excited to catch up with him one-on-one. After our usual roll call, we headed to our favorite spot down in the Lexus Lounge for tea and coffee, and then made our way up to the main doors. As we were sitting there talking, I went to take a sip of my coffee, and my coffee spilled all over the front of my uniform. Of course, John laughed and refused to get any napkins to help clean up the mess. I said, "John, I'm going to smell like old coffee the rest of the night." He said, "No worries. I have my special cologne in my car that you can have." We had a good event that night. We shared stories, called each other up on things that had been going on in our lives, and even made future plans. After the event, we went to his car where he gave me some of that special cologne he had. Now, for everyone that knows John, has been around John, you know he has a very distinct smell. I sprayed some on my uniform to ease that coffee smell, got in my car to start the shift, sat there and just laughed. I said, "Dang, I spent the last 5 hours with John, and now I'm going to have to spend the next 8 on shift thinking he's sitting right beside me." Little did I know, 4 hours later, he would be gone. As most of us know, John loved to do traffic-related work. Whether it was writing tickets, to investigating vehicle crashes, to working DUIs, John knew anything and everything about the traffic-related field of police operations. The people that knew him best knew that his dream was to be on motors unit here within the department. He loved motorcycles and had a passion for them, and would often ride on the weekends with some of the central crew. But what a lot of people don't know is that he applied for a crime suppression unit which deals primarily with narcotics, not traffic. I can distinctly remember John taking online courses, studying for the SOP and the interview, and even recommended me to take some courses to further improve my chances of advancing my career. John poured his heart and soul into that interview, and by the time the interview rolled around, he knew that SOP like the back of his hand. While he didn't get the position, this just goes to show you how he felt about this job and what he did. He would do anything to further his career and to become more knowledgeable about different aspects of this job. He lived for this job, and you can see that in everything that he did. I think I speak for the Central C detail when I say when we ever had a question about work, we went to John. John worked all the time, and he would volunteer his time to help out around the precinct when we were short. He was always signing up for extra jobs and extra shifts to help fill those spots we were short. From working regular shift to working extra jobs within the department to working at Bridgestone, you can see how passionate John was about this job. The crazy thing about this job is that it can literally consume you. You will find yourself basically living for this job and find it difficult to experience things outside of work. You fall in love with it. And even with everything that John knew and how much John worked and how happy John seemed, there was still a void there that one could not explain. No matter how happy John was, how many cool events we worked together, or how many great memories we shared, I could tell there was something missing. And it wasn't until he told me about Gavin. I remember sitting at work next to him when he told me that he's a dad and showed me a picture of Gavin. I looked at the picture and I said, poor guy, he got all your looks. I said, you put a mustache on that kid and it's 27, and it's you 27 years younger. I asked him, I remember asking him, I said, John, are you scared? Are you nervous? He looked me dead in the eyes and said, no, I'm going to be the best father you've ever seen. And he was. He took that challenge head on and put everything he had into being the best father he could be. Talk about courageous. And just like that, that hole was filled. It was almost like a floodgate opened and flooded with good fortune. The joy on his face when he would talk about Gavin and Caitlin and Liam. Finally, he was a complete man, and you could see it in every aspect of his life. He had purpose. I hope and I pray that one day I can be the father John was to Gavin and Liam in just a short time. Gavin, Liam, and Caitlin became his entire life. John taught me a lot about life in just a short time, and we had some great memories together. He taught me about compassion, persistence, courage, and most importantly, he taught me to love unconditionally. He taught me that it doesn't matter your skin color, your background, what you do for a living. Nothing mattered except you are a human being, and to John that meant he was going to be there for you and love you unconditionally, no matter what. I believe that we can all take something positive from John's life and not be scared to express it. You know he was never scared to express his true feelings. Thank you, John, for everything you did for me and for so many others. Thank you for the many lessons you taught me about life and how to live it to the fullest. You may be gone, but you will never be forgotten. My colleagues and I constructed a quote that I would like to leave you with that summed up the life of John Anderson. It reads, "When we called, he came. A tragedy took his life, and we will no longer have the luxury of his presence. John Anderson, you will be missed."